Hey everybody, this is the surprise live. We're having our makeup interview with Stuart, who was unfortunately sick yesterday. I was sick yesterday too, so maybe that's just the universe making sure I still got my Stuart interview in instead of having somebody cover for me. But
hi everyone.
We are here. That's Stuart. I am going to play the video talking about comic books for kids because that's why we're here. This is part of the Multiverse fundraiser supporting comic books for kids this year, who gives age-appropriate comic books to kids who are in the hospital all over the United States, Canada, and I think they opened up a branch to the UK. So you go ahead and check out this message from Mark, and then we'll get into our interview.
My name is Mark Weiss, and I'm the president and founder of an organization called Comic Books for Kids. Our complete entire mission is dedicated to providing comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers. I've been passionate about comic books literally my entire life. I love the industry, I love the mythology of the characters, but I've always also wanted to give back. And it occurred to me that perhaps something could be done that would allow us to create an organization that allowed us to provide comic books to the kids in hospitals and cancer centers. And I asked them, I said, if we were to provide comic books to you, would you like them? Every hospital I called had the same story. Please do this for our kids. My goal at the time, a year ago, was to deliver 1,000 comics in a calendar year. By the way, I had no inventory. To 20 hospitals, which, by the way, I hadn't contacted, and bring on 2 publishers. That was my 2017 goal. As we wrapped up 2017, we shipped out over 8,000 comics last year to over 100 children's hospitals in almost every state in the country, and almost every publisher that is here today is working with us. Our community tab on our website shows stories from nurses, from children, from mothers of students, patients, children who have had their lives touched by the simple, small act of kindness of just giving them a comic book. The stories are incredible. You can't make this up. And if anyone had ever told me that we would be influencing people's lives by just these small acts of kindness, I don't think I would have ever recognized the impact. I feel very humbled and very flattered that we've been able to touch so many people's and children's lives. And I never thought the responsiveness would be what we are seeing. It's about letting kids be kids again. And it's about bringing comic books back to the kids.
All right, everybody, that was Mark Weiss. If you want to know more about what they do, why they do it, if you stay on this channel, either whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and go back to Friday's live streams, he had a really great interview. It made both my co-hosts cry. So if you want to get a little teary-eyed this week, it's been a Monday. We hope you're all doing great. As of right now, the fundraiser, or maybe not right this second, but the last time I looked at it, we were over $960 out of our $1,500 goal. We have 6 days to go. So we are doing amazing. Make sure you share with your friends, invite them. You can donate by following the information that I'm going to put at the bottom of the screen here. So you can either find the fundraiser pinned to the top of the Multiverse Fundraiser Facebook page. So if you're not watching, it's FUN Raiser, because we're not just raising funds for a good cause. We are raising fun. Or if that fundraiser has expired and you're catching this on the replay, you can donate to Comic Books for Kids any time of the year at comicbooksforkids.org. I'm going to bring Stuart on and introduce Stuart Sayger.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I was sick yesterday. Had to reschedule a bunch of my panels and stuff. So
it's okay. We all have a little bit of that. It's a busy time of year. You know what? This is supposed to be the downtime. There aren't many comic book conventions. That's not the case anymore. We've got a few starting here right away, and I've got a lot to get ready for them. So
yeah. Me too.
We're busy.
Yeah. Stuart and I actually met because I would go to conventions and I liked his art. And then we stayed friends throughout the years because we work a bunch of the same conventions in like the general Indianapolis area.
Well, we know a lot of the same people too.
That too, a lot of really talented people. So, but we're here to talk about you. So first of all, I guess I want to ask you, what does comic books for kids and getting comic books in anybody who's going through a hard time, like kids in the hospital, or they also send to soldiers, people in the army. What does getting comic books into people who are having a rough times hands mean to you personally?
Well, yeah, I say this all the time about comic books. When I was little, I really liked them for the simple fact that I thought they were something that was kid appropriate. That wasn't a stripped down version of something that was otherwise an adult product. Like when I was little, you could buy things like toy hammers and toy drills. Kids want to use their parents' tools. I don't want, a toy drill. I want the real drill. Well, a comic book seemed to me like it was the thing. It was doing what it was supposed to be doing. It was the thing that made me love art. It was the thing that made me love drawing, the thing that made me love reading. It's something that was kind of always there. You can do on your own. You can connect with them because anytime you read anything, it's a really personal act. So I love that they were accessible. I love that, I don't know how to put it. They've given me so much my whole life. So I always feel like when you have something that teaches you to love art and love reading, and you can get that in someone's hands when they're young, there's little that's going to beat that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't get into comic books when I was a kid. I got into them as an adult.
You did it all wrong.
Right. So I hear all these stories in the Cereal Box Network, the podcast network that sponsors this event. We use all their infrastructure, right? The owner of the network is really generous with us when Kelly and I were like, we've been running this virtual convention. We want more resources. And he's just like, use everything we've got. Right. And everybody in that network almost has these like really rich stories of the way comic books shaped their childhood. And I'm like, for me, it's like I get to get a little bit of my childhood back. I was doing a bunch of I started working under the table when I was like 11 years old. Right.
Yeah, I won't tell. I'll tell you, a friend of mine is a radio DJ in Dubai, and he got to interview Harrison Ford. And he did his great interview with Harrison Ford, and he'd come from Gas City, Indiana. I'm not supposed to tell you that. And didn't have a whole lot of things growing up. He just didn't. And so he was telling, when the interview was over, he told me that he told Harrison, he said, I know a lot of people told you they love your work or whatever, but I don't know if anybody's told you this. What was really great was there were a lot of us that maybe things weren't quite as good at home as we wanted them to be, or as good at school, and things weren't going great. And it was awfully nice for a lot of us to be able to, put on the Indiana Jones DVD, crawl under the covers, and just have like a moment of escape and safety. Mm-hmm. And Harrison Ford kind of got, misty-eyed over it, and so did my friend. And I thought that's kind of what makes this stuff so great. I mean, there's a reason this stuff has resonance with us when we're adults, but some of it has to do with the fact that we just fell in love with it when we were young, and it was there for us. When you talk about what is important for getting these books in people's hands, it's just a comic book, but sometimes it can do that much for somebody if you get them in the right moment.
Yeah. For me, it was novels. I read nonstop, but I've had migraines since I was really young, like so young that my parents were like, I don't think you're old enough. I don't think you know what a migraine is. And I was like, well, I can't see and my head hurts.
Right.
So.
Okay, it's not a migraine. My head hurts and I can't see. Let's just agree on that. Right.
Right. And so I think if I'd had comic books where I wasn't having to read line by line, I had something that was bigger and more colorful, that might have helped me at a time when I wasn't in the hospital with migraines, but I was sick and I was missing out some of my escape. So, I mean, that's why our title sponsor, the Cereal Box Network, actually works with comic books for kids all year round. And we have a comment.
Yeah.
Zane Zielinski says, you think he'd comb his hair?
You'd think. Well, Zane, that's nice that's Zane's comment, because normally he just asks me to sing. And believe me, I sing more poorly than I comb my hair. So I'm kind of growing it out. I'm not joking.
It is a little on the long side.
Yeah, I'm thinking about going for a different style, but I have to let it get there first. I'm not joking, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It might get too hot in the summer and I'll say, forget it. It's got to go. But anyway, we were talking about comic books, enjoying the stuff when you're young. It is interesting. You brought it up that you didn't encounter the stuff until you're older. And it seems like when I was little, very little, there were still Spinnerets, and there were many kids who didn't read comic books, but almost everybody had read a comic book. They were a little bit easier to get your hands on. First of all, they were, there weren't $5 books. When I was little, someone could give you $1 and you could buy multiple comics with that new, and still have money left over for candy. So there was this opportunity to be exposed to the thing and at least give it a shot much more easily when we were younger than there is now. Superheroes are big. We've got lots of movies, anime, video games. We're familiar with these characters, but it is surprising to me how many times I've had a conversation with somebody where they can tell me everything about Spider-Man and they've never read a Spider-Man comic book. And I say, listen, you should read one of these things. The pacing is different. The fact that it's drawn by hand, usually the art is very different. And, I've had people say, yeah, I like this book, but I wasn't into the art. Well, guess what? Different people draw them. You can find the guy who's the artist you like or the writer you like. There's enough of it out there. Spider-Man's a good example. You may only love 10% of all the Spider-Man comic books out there, but think how many 10% of all Spider-Man comic books are. That's a ton. So you can kind of tailor this hobby to what you like and what your tastes are. It's truly one of the things that I love so much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the art style that you like for characters that have been drawn lots and lots of other ways come through in your art. Like, can I put an example of Daredevil on the screen that I've got here? Like,
oh, let's see a Daredevil. Let's see what this is.
So I own this one, but this is just a digital image I had found on your
website. So here's what's funny. I drew that piece. This is what I love. I can't believe you brought this one up. I was at a show. I think I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, of all places, and I had arrived earlier than I expected. It might have been, maybe it wasn't Fort Wayne, but I remember driving north, so there might have been that time change, right? You go from East Coast time to Central, and so you have some extra time. And I remember Steranko was there, and he did the same thing I did. We both arrived early, and we had time to kill. And so I drew this piece standing up. Now, it's got some digital coloring, but this one was drawn mostly with black and white ink and then some oil pastel, if you can believe that. And some of the oil pastel still comes through. But this was mostly rendered as, we've got time to kill, let's make something. I was talking with Steranko and wanted to show off a little bit. I know how to draw too. It's funny because every time I see that, it looks good, but it was just me, just kind of in the mood, being busy.
Well, I mean, I wonder if that makes it. I wonder if that makes it one of those things that really is like your style. Like you didn't really even have to think about it. You weren't prepared for it. You just sat down and did it.
I think there's some truth in that. There's some honesty in that. I've had projects where I've had to work on something and you get some editorial guidance or it's something you're not quite as familiar with or someone you haven't worked with before and you're trying to really please somebody. And sometimes you can tighten up and make the piece a little less daring that way. But you're right. There were no expectations, no restrictions on that one. I actually think that I can, with my style, come out with some real home runs that way.
I think so. I mean, I've watched you do your thing at the booth in between customers and stuff.
I'm kind of clean. Do I have any paint on me right now? Let's see. Yeah, I do. There's always paint on this thumb.
I know.
The left thumb is always white. Yeah. Well, I was working on, let's see, what was I doing last night? I was working on a Shiver in the Dark thing for a print that's going to be a custom print for a show. So I would show it to you, but I can't yet.
Yeah, it's not fair to the person who custom ordered it. But speaking of Shiver in the Dark, I do have one example cover here. Am I right in saying that this comic is your baby, like out of all the projects you've got going? Yeah, I mean,
it's the one that's been with me the longest. It's the one that I, it's the first self-published book I did. That was actually a cover I did for it when the book was 20 years old. That was a cover that was made. So the very first show I did was Wizard World Chicago 2001. I made that book for Wizard World 2021, just a small number of them for people who had come and said, "You're that guy, that kid who was here 20 years ago." And I say, "Yep, that's me." But the funny thing is, that was a book that not only is it my baby in that I wrote it, drew it, did all that, all the obvious things, but it was kind of the thing that sort of unlocked, I think, who I am. In that, before I made that book, and that was my own book, I had been making sample pages or submissions for things, and you're always trying to guess what it is that somebody wants. If I drew Batman pages, I was always thinking, it should be this sort of Neil Adamsy, Jim Aparo thing. If I were doing Iron Man, you'd think, oh, you kind of tap into Bob Layton, just because those are sort of the examples of what the thing is supposed to be. When you do your own book, you get outside of that. You say, well, what's it supposed to be? And you just say, well, I decide what it's supposed to be. It doesn't have to be anything. And that just sort of knocked the doors open, where I used any art style, any medium. And I learned a lot because I tried a lot, but also, you just felt kind of complete freedom because there couldn't be a failure that anyone else would judge. You got to just judge yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if you liked it and you thought it worked well, go with it. Speaking of which, because I know you are a fan of that title, I pulled out a couple pieces I want to show you that I'd worked on. You've seen the printed pieces of these, but so one of the things I've been doing more recently is, you'll love this. Last night, the reason my thumb is white is because I was painting the piece with gouache. This is a Corel plate, and I've just been putting my black and white gouache on it and using it as a palette. But not a lot of comic book people paint pieces in gouache. If you don't know, it's like a really thick watercolor that's opaque. But rather than having a black and white piece that is line art scan, I sort of have a simple painting. I can scan that and color that. So you have at least seen the color version of this, but here's the black and white painted original. Can you see it here?
Yeah, I can.
I'll zoom in. So you can see her.
That. I own this one too, in one of the big sizes. It's in that big art display book you made me buy.
Yeah, I remember you picking one of these up, which is why I showed it. But so this is, it's kind of funny because gouache is opaque, so it feels almost like dry clay or plaster. It really does. It's got this really, you don't want to rub your fingernails on it. It'll be like a chalkboard. Ew. But it makes this great painting. I know a lot of people would say I would never make a comic book like that, but that's how I make it look differently. Use different techniques. And do you want to see some more art?
Of course I do. That explains a lot. I was going to ask you some about what you think makes your art different or feel different, and I don't have to ask you anything. I should have just let you do this on your own.
Well, I will tell you, different. I like art outside of comics, so I'm a self-taught artist. But I did get my major was in journalism, but I had a second major in art history, and I was really interested in just soaking the whole thing up. And plus, a lot of the artists I like are outside of comics. I really like Bob Peak and Bernie Fuchs, and one of my favorite artists is a children's book illustrator named Charles Keeping that no one would know who he is, but he did a lot of stuff.
I'll have to look him up.
I love him. I remember I brought a book of his to San Diego in 2000, and I showed it to Sienkiewicz, and he asked, "Is this mine?" And I said, "No, I can't give you that." And Ashley Wood tried to take it too, so I knew I was onto something good. Neither one of those guys knew this artist's name. They both act like they know now, but I'm telling you, they didn't know then. But I will show you. Here's some of the things I've been working on. This is a plug, by the way. I'm going to tell you this. So I should have copies of this for sale in about 10 days. Tune in, follow me on Facebook or whatever. I have 5 different exclusives for. Here's probably the best. This is a new Vampirilla series is coming out. So this
one you hinted at it to me earlier.
And I will tell you, I painted so much of that. When you see what that looks like, you'll see I'm tapping into my inner San Julian. And look at this one. This is another one that's coming. How cool is this?
Oh, I love that. I love the perspective on that one.
That took a lot of time to work that out. But these are so big. These are 20 by 24. And then coming later, how about this? Because you asked me sort of where my style comes from. I always feel like you've heard the term kitsch art. Mm-hmm. Kitsch art is really hard to define, and I've read different criticisms on it, and I came across one definition of kitsch that I love, and it is this. When artist A, known for producing object B, does exactly that. Okay.
I love that.
Well, so then I try to say, well, you don't ever want to fall into that. So you want to try and do different things, right? So look at this cool cover that I have coming out here really soon. This is going to be made in conjunction with Nickel Plate, or Noblesville Creates, which is a non-for-profit here in Hamilton County. There's a total solar eclipse that's going to be happening in April, and they've teamed up with me and Archie Comics. Archie, look at this. This is the line art. Now look, would you think that I could draw Veronica like that?
I guess you'd have to paint it, wouldn't you? This isn't my medium as an artist, so.
So this is a line drawing, but this is the cover. We've got 2 different Betting Veronica covers that are coming out. We'll have them in April, and this is going to be one of them. And the cover gag here is because there's a total solar eclipse. They're going to have a 2.5-minute long slumber party because it'll be night in the middle of the day.
I love that.
But what's cool is that's a hard style. I mean, so I'm not used to working in that style, and people will say things that people often think drawing something like Richie Rich or Archie is very easy because there are fewer lines and it's kind of cartoony. Let me tell you, when you've got fewer lines to work with, every line has to be perfect, right? If I have a loose expressive style, which I normally inherently do, I have to make sure my lighting is right. I work really hard to make sure my lighting is dramatic and dynamic and it works, but you know, I can have, you know, all kinds of loose expressive lines, and it's not really going to be off model. When you draw this Archie stuff, you got to nail this. Here's the other cover I did for them.
Wow, that is great. It's really different than most of your stuff that like I've owned and brought home, though, for sure. I can see how that would be
totally
probably more difficult, like for you, because it's against your style.
Oh, and it's against my instincts. That's the big thing. You know, when I'm working on it, I always kind of feel like, oh, I'll put a drop shadow on this, and no, that's not what they do. You know, and their composition is terribly different too. You know, if they often have an object blocking short in the shallows in the background, a tree, a fence, or something, you will very rarely see a shot in Archie that goes on to the horizon. They just don't have them. So when you draw something like that, the reader who's familiar with Archie would look at it and just say, something looks off here, and I can't tell what it is. So it's line weight, it's composition, it's color palette. The colors on these are the most bright, clean, brilliant things I've ever done. Yeah, I mean, I've shown them to people, and Comic Book in a Day was last week at Noblesville Creates, which is an event they put on where people get together and we make a comic book in one day, and I pulled those out and sort of debuted them to the attendees. And I mean, I really had to say, yes, I did all of it. I know it doesn't look like me, I promise you. So
yeah, I can.
If you want to be good as an artist, try different things. Yeah.
So for me, I mean, again, like drawing and painting and stuff like that's not my medium. I don't do a lot that's 2-dimensional, but when I do, I rely a lot on that smudge technique where I put my lines kind of where I want them, and then I just push the graphite around with my finger until it looks right. Put a shadow here, move it around there. Like I was reading
You know who James Montgomery Flagg is? The man who painted Uncle Sam saying, "I want you."
Mm-hmm.
That's him. So he did a lot of work with a lot of line work, a lot of line illustrations near the turn of the century. And they look like they're drawn with a metal nib, but they're really drawn with a brush. But I was reading some art criticism of his, and I kind of loved this. Somebody gave James Montgomery Flagg, of all people, a hard time saying, you know, he often draws anything that you could draw in one line, he draws it with 3. Right? And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, so what he would do is you could normally have like a hard outline on someone's hand. Okay. But he might draw 3 lines that sort of suggest the shape, and they might even overlap a little bit. What that does is that creates a fuzziness to the edge. If you get your face really close to it, you will see 3 lines. If you hold it at a distance, the 3 lines kind of blur, and you end up with not a hard edge, but an object that almost becomes out of focus. And that's what he was doing. So it seems kind of funny, but you know, it's not just being loose, right? Because his style was really controlled with those lines, but he knew how to create focus and create a soft edge. He does it differently than I do. I do it the way you described. I like to smear something and actually have a physical hard edge, but he knew enough about the line weight to achieve the same effect with different techniques. So that's what's amazing about this. You can say, like, well, Betty and Veronica's drawn a clean line style. Well, Montgomery Flagg's lines were clean, but he overlapped them to make everything not have a hard edge, which is absolutely not Archie whatsoever.
Right.
It was a long way around to make my point, but there's some good information there.
Yeah. David McDonald says, now I kind of want to see you do an Archie comic in your usual style.
They exist. That is to say, I've drawn them for in letters and fans and things like that. I've done a commission here or two, but nothing that would be printed. Though the funny thing is, I had such a good time doing this with Archie, and was sort of talking to him about how much freedom we can have in the style. I wanted to get a conventional one under my belt. We might do another one that's a little bit more, because they've got a couple horror titles, and I do a ton of horror stuff. You know, if they have the right Sabrina project and I can really make it spooky, yeah, right? Doesn't that sound fun?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I got super into the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and my husband and I were just like, he was excited that there was a reboot, and then he was like, oh, this is not what I liked when I was a teenager. And I was like, okay, have fun, bye.
That's right. Well, I want to say this too. You commented on something that I don't want to let go by, and that was that you like to work in 3D traditionally. I've tried to do some 3D work. I'm not terribly good at it. I'm fascinated by it, and I've known some people who do really work in 3D. And knowing that you do work in 3D, when we've interacted a few times, I believe it because I've kept an eye on you. Here's why. Because years ago, I'm very happily married, but I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, I dated a sculptor. And I could tell talking to her, she could describe things, and I could see that she would see them in space. Right? You know, you'd say, well, what's the thing look like? You know, for me, I would say, oh, it's, I don't know, 3 feet long and it's green or what, let me draw it for you. And I would see her say, it's this big, it's about this tall, it's got this piece that comes out, and she, you know what I mean? Her brain worked in 3D. And I remember talking to her one time, and she described a piece of furniture that she had seen at an antique mall. And I said, draw it for me. And she handed her the paper, and she just kind of froze for a second. She said, I'm told you, it's this big, it's this tall, this is what it looks like. So there's something about how the brain works. I know some people who can do both. I could maybe do both, but I truly know where my strength is. I mean, because I've sculpted things in clay. I remember I did it in college, and I thought, like a figure, I did a bust of somebody. This looks pretty good, and you turn it, see it from another angle, and you think, oh, that's horrible. Mm-hmm. That's the problem with sculpture. You know, art, we can just 2D. We just do one image. I remember reading that when the TV show Beavis and Butthead became a hit, they wanted to make toys off of them. And Mike Judge, the way they're drawn, they got pictures of them, and they realized that the model for Beavis doesn't work right. Like, it doesn't turn. Where his nose is when you look over his shoulder is very different than where it is when he's up front. So when they made the toys, they had to, cheat. They had to come up with a compromise. So if every once in a while when I see like a Beavis and Butthead, particularly Beavis, because I'm told he's the one where the model doesn't work, I'll pick up the toy and I'll turn it around and try to find a way that it looks wrong, right? Because you're only used to seeing him for 2D in a couple positions. 3D is really hard.
I don't want to ignore Brandon Noel or Noel.
No,
I'm not
how
sure,
are you?
Who says you're a king with lighting in your art. I would agree with that. One of the things that makes people recognize when they walk into my house and be like, oh, that's more of Stuart's stuff, is the way
light.
you do creative lighting on stuff. Yeah, where it's a lot of like, this was dark and there was an explosion over there, and that's what's lighting up this character's face, or things like that. That
I will take that. Whenever I'm talking to young artists or trying to, encourage people how to draw, I always say, in comic books, particularly American comic books, we get really concerned with form. These are my glasses. We'll draw the edges of everything. And I always feel like, the eye only sees reflected light. So don't draw the object, draw the light that it reflects. And glasses are a great thing to draw, because look at what the lens is doing there, right? Yeah. So do you draw that? That's a clear object, but there's light behind it. We wrestle with how to draw clear objects, but ultimately you're only drawing, again, reflected light. So focus on that. And it's why actors often like old TV. I think Ailey, my wife, was joking. We watched an episode of Adventures of Superman, the 50s TV show, and she said he has no lenses. Those are just frames. But if he'd had lenses, it would have reflected too much. You couldn't see his eyes.
I mean, when I wear sunglasses for a costume on camera, my ring light is just like, I've got this alien effect going on.
Right.
And it does get tricky there. Hey, for anybody who is just tuning in, I'm Krayley. I'm one half of Phoenix Sisters Cosplay. This is Stuart Sayger. He is an amazing artist. We are here doing he's an amazing artist. Don't let him see it. So we're doing the Multiverse fundraiser. This is a sort of bonus episode we're doing, right? We're supporting Comic Books for Kids this year, which is a charity that puts comic books in the hands of children in hospitals and cancer wards all around the country and now internationally. The donate information is scrolling by at the bottom. If you visit the Multiverse fundraiser, so it's fundraiser without the D, there's a pinned post right there. You can go, or if you're seeing this past February 2nd, you're catching a replay, that's fine too. All year round, you can go to comicbooksforkids.org and donate that way. None of the money comes to us. The Facebook fundraiser also goes directly to them. They just know that we sent you there if you use that Facebook link there. So if you're just joining us, thank you. Hi, hello.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit. You travel a lot, like all the time. You travel some of the most out of anybody I know for part of their job, right? How do you think do you think traveling like further and broad, getting a broader audience when you travel helps you like as an artist with the way you actually develop your subjects and stuff? I had this question planned out in my head, right?
Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at, and I don't know if I have a good answer for it because this sounds like I'm dodging it, and I don't mean it to be, but it has to be thrown out. If I go to a comic book convention, you go to a comic book convention, I draw comic books, right? So I can go to a comic book convention. Let's say I go to a really big one, go to San Diego, New York, or something like that, and there are literally hundreds of other people in the room that you would argue are doing the same thing I do. That is to say, they're drawing Batman or Spider-Man or whatever, and they're using a lot of the same tools. We're using an ink and a number 2 sable hairbrush and whatever else. Okay, but beyond that, everybody who makes the stuff, we make it in a vacuum. The relationship is me, the paper, and the materials. Everybody suddenly goes away, and so it goes from a room of 500 people all doing the same thing at the same time to 500 people doing something absolutely by themselves with themselves. Okay, so I think if you ask 500 different people, you get 500 different answers. What excites people? What do they get out of the traveling? I can tell you that it is nice to be able to see peers and handle artwork that they made. If somebody did something, I think, well, how'd they do that? You get it in your hand, you can handle the original and ask some questions. But for the most part, I'm self-taught, and I didn't go to art school, but I've talked to a lot of people who went to art school, and one of the things we hear regularly is that they get to a certain point, and if the professor's frank and honest with them, they'll say, we can't teach you anymore. You're not necessarily done learning, but you're at the stage where the rest of it is going to be very personal. You kind of have to do it on your own. And I kind of believe that's true. So the challenge is for any artist to stay flexible, to stay interested, to not just fall in the trap of just, doing their own thing, to look at other art. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this Archie cover. I knew it would be hard. I think they're good Archie covers. I think it's going to be very difficult for me, who is not a conventional Archie artist, to ever make a great Archie cover. That's really going to be hard because I haven't really mastered that thing yet. I think it's going to be a lot easier for me to make a great Swamp Thing cover or great Batman cover. Those are up my alleys, right? But when you do that Archie stuff, you learn more skills. It helps you with the Batman covers. The Batman covers help you do the Archie. And when you go out and you meet all these different people and you travel, you can learn an awful lot. You can be exposed to different things. But, the travel and exposure to that stuff only works if you put yourself in a mental position to receive it. When I studied art history in college, I was not very interested in art after about 1850. I just wasn't. Most of the Impressionist painters turn up, and I really was interested in the Baroque. I like the Rococo. I like neoclassicism. These are art styles that people aren't that interested in, but they were kind of controlled. They were really kind of narrative based. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? There's a whole lot of art out there. I don't even have to care about Impressionism. But then I also thought, the rest of the world loves this stuff. You can continue to be disinterested in it, or you can try to see what everybody else gets out of it and learn something. And making myself sort of say, open your brain up and allow it to operate on its own terms. Best thing I could have done. I mean, it allowed my art style to grow. It turned me into a looser artist, a more expressive artist. So much of what I am known for in terms of my style comes from being to sort of unlock your brain. I grew up a Neil Adams fan. Neil Adams was the guy. I thought if there's anybody you want to draw comic books like, it's him. Well, a couple of problems with that. Number one, there's only one Neil Adams out there, and he's already kind of has that on lockdown. And number two, and I got to know Neil really well. I was friends with Neil. I'm friends with his family. There are a lot of people out there. Neil would never agree with this, but there are a lot of people out there that can do some things better than Neil could do them. And I mean that. And so to sort of strive for only one thing and shut yourself out to the rest, you overlook a lot. I think Neil was good with color. I don't think he was great. I think there are guys who are better with color and could do more expressive things with color. Neil was very literal in his approach. But if you needed to do something that was very surreal, I don't think he's the artist you pick. Sorry, Neil, and I love his stuff. But my point being is, if you really want this great vocabulary and be able to make a lot of art, then you have to draw from everything. That is where the traveling can benefit, but you have to put yourself in a position to mentally accept it or be prepared for it. I've been at shows before where I was exhausted and knew I had a lot to do, and I had to do a drawing presentation, I had to do this, that, or the other, and had to focus on what was in front of me and missed opportunities. So get there, take a deep breath, and say, what is here in front of me? What can I respond to? The thing that really unlocked my art style as much as anything else was I was getting a little bit frustrated, kind of trying to work in the same style. Like I kind of felt like it was diminishing returns. I was trying to get better at one little thing, and I remembered in sort of a moment of stepping away, I looked at, of all things, Vampirilla that Esteban Morato drew. And in fact, I just looked at it a couple days ago when I was doing these Vampirillas, like, what was it that grabbed me? And I remember the issue, and he just had an entirely different style that I had seen 100,000 times before, but I was emotionally in a spot where I wanted something different because I was hitting my head against the wall doing my regular thing. So even though I'd seen his work before, I had to be ready to receive it. And then suddenly light bulb went off, and I saw him do all these things where he might draw somebody as a silhouette, which is a simple thing. We have that in comics all the time. But maybe he drew them as a white silhouette on a black background instead of the other way around, which not that unique. But if you don't do that, if it doesn't occur to you ever to do that sort of thing, that's a new technique and tool you can add to your arsenal. He did things that I thought were really cool, where he would maybe draw somebody's head really detailed, because he really wants you to focus on that, their face, and then their hair might just be an outline, right? And he didn't draw all the little hairs in there, and I thought, wow, by leaving the hair just as shape, I'm focusing on the eyes and the facial features so much more. I learned that from him, how to control what people pay attention to. I don't use his line style. I don't have composition the way he does, but I realized how important it was to pick the objects that are important on the page and give more attention to those. That was something I learned specifically from him.
Do you think that translates into the way you panel out your comics and stuff? Because when we were talking to comic book artists recently in a comics panel and stuff like that, we talked about like the decisions you make on how to show what in which panel, how many panels you have, how it serves the story. So you think taking one image and deciding what people pay attention to on that page, how does that translate into the way you separate things out into panels on a comic book page?
It's kind of like speech, I guess. I don't know if a lot of people talk about art like this, but it's just when you letter a comic book, I'll use this as a good example. Typically, most word balloons have something in them that is in bold text. And it can be something like, I've done this there's this exercise I play all the time where it's like you pick a simple sentence and then you emphasize just one of the words. For a comic, it'll be something like, you gave all of him your money, or you gave all of your money to him. You gave all of your money to him. You gave all of your money to him. So whichever word you put the emphasis on, that becomes the lead for that sentence. And I think that when you build a comic book page, we're really supposed to start in the upper left and work our way across, but you can unfortunately peak. And anytime you're drawing anything, you sort of pick, what is this thing about? What is happening? And very often, if you've got a good writer, the writer sort of done a lot of the heavy lifting, but has left you enough room where you can sort of add some flavor, change the emphasis of it. The dumbest thing you can do is just draw exactly the same thing that the art or the writer has told in his words. How can you add to it? I often kind of feel like if I've got a really good fight or an argument going between two people, the great ways you can sort of express the verbal discussion is with two things: that the facial expressions and their hands. But usually they're arguing about one thing. So you get one panel that's going to be, that's the peak of that argument, right? What happens? Who is really instigating the argument there? How does the person respond? All the panels play off each other. We all know this, but you pick your moments, right? You have to pick your moments. And often I've thought about where if I have a scene that's lasting a long time and I need to progress it, you can't give any information that's already given before. Right? So if I've drawn you and you're arguing and expressing, and then I draw me and I'm arguing and expressing, the shots of our faces, that's already used up. If the argument continues, what do? I might have a close-up of just my hands. Hey, I'm talking to you, do something like that. I might reestablish a long shot, or I might show the thing we're arguing over. If you and I are arguing over whatever, the ownership of my phone, at some point, I will draw the phone and have the word balloons around it. You're always adding more information. You kind of pick your moments, but within the page, you kind of want something to kind of be the dominant moment. Not every time, but often. And then I always tell everybody, if you've never drawn comics before, this is the easiest trick in the book. And I didn't realize this till I really sat down and started making full comic books. When you turn a page, that's your opportunity to surprise somebody. When you see a page, this is a KISS cover I've done. Mm-hmm. You can take all this in at once. The first time you can surprise somebody is turn the page and it's right up here. And when you look at the next page, you can surprise somebody when they turn the page and you get this right up here. But a surprise never really happens down here. Because you're supposed to
thought about that before, yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's pretty easy and pretty simple. But I learned that doing on the very first issue of Shiver in the Dark. There's a panel where Grace is laying in bed and this like tentacle slithers up and it grabs her and she wakes up and she's in this nightmare, and it goes from these 3 small panels that all look exactly the same and have the tentacle kind of slither up, and then you turn the page and she's being grabbed by this giant beast. And I've had so many people look at that book and they're like, wait, what happened? And I said, well, you were supposed to be surprised. Now, I wasn't supposed to have you be lost, but if you looked and carefully took in every panel, which we're all supposed to do and not blast through everything, there was a big establishing shot of her being asleep and 3 inset panels of that thing creeping up, right? So all the information is there. The size helps dictate the importance. We have an establishing shot of her sleeping. The insets show the change of time. She doesn't move, but the inset panels do move. So there's a relationship between these two. And that's what's so cool. Look, making comics is really hard. And I've tell people this all the time. You can be a good writer. You can be a good artist. You can be good at both, which is fairly rare. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily a good maker of comic books. I've known people who are really good artists who have great ideas for stories, and they try to make a comic book and they don't know how to make the beats. They don't know how to lead the eye through it. They don't know how to control the I always call it giving gas and pumping the brakes. The reader knows how they're supposed to move through the thing. And picking the right moments is really hard. I'm a big Alex Raymond fan, the gentleman who drew Flash Gordon. But as Flash Gordon marches, it gets started in 1934, and his art gets better and better. But at a certain point, Flash Gordon stops working as, I don't think it works terribly well as a comic strip, because Alex Raymond falls in love with drawing these gorgeous pictures. It almost turns into a picture book where there's such a big gap from panel to panel. You might have Flash Gordon, dancing with a princess in this awesome dress, and then the next scene is, they're getting into a car, and there's such a big jump that every picture just seems like a standalone image with accompanying text. That's not exactly what comics is. I would rather really be romanced by the scene of the ballroom, see the dance, have a little bit of their interaction, and get into that moment, and then give me a transition that pulls me out, tells me they're going into the car. Well, he did all that and relied on his text covering it, and that's fine, but that to me is more of a storybook and not comics.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. We do have a couple more comments over here. Willow at Skylar Production says, had the pleasure of having him live draw on my show a few years ago. So glad to see you again. So she mentioned that to me. Willow's one of our volunteers. So
I am not afraid to draw in person or live. I've done a lot of it.
No, you've even encouraged others to do that. Tell the audience a little bit about the drink and draw that you do at some conventions.
There's one that I've done a couple times at PopCon that's really pretty good. So I will tell you what, there are so many things that can be pitfalls for a young artist, or even a mature artist. There are always things we're not very good at, or a little afraid of. And I always kind of feel like you learn the most when you try the things that are hardest and do the things that you're a little bit more afraid of. I know a lot of people have a difficult time drawing X, can't draw hands very well, so they don't draw hands, and as a result, they don't get better. They just sort of dodge it. I got to the point where I felt like I wasn't very good with color, and I thought maybe I should just be a black and white artist, because really I was not very good with it, and I just thought, yeah, that might be better for my career if I got great at just black and white, but I don't think it's better for me as an artist. I want to learn how to do color, so I doubled down, did a lot of color, and I wasn't very good at it, and got through it. Drawing in a public setting is something a lot of people are not very comfortable with, and I don't blame them, because you get judged. I happen to be good at it because I've got a style that's loose. I've got a style that's expressive. But also, when you draw in a public setting, you draw for that purpose. You draw differently. You allow yourself to say, this is not going to be this super tight masterpiece, because I need to work quickly. I've got an audience, and I have to embrace that and forgive myself that everything's not going to be perfect. But when you can do those mental tricks, you allow yourself to work in different styles, and you learn different skills, and you kind of get over yourself. I know several people have said they're going to publish a comic book and do their first couple shows. Do they have any advice? And I'll say, oh yeah, there are tons of things you're going to learn from it. First of all, you're going to learn so much about yourself as an artist doing your first show. I mean, a ton. How do you feel about drawing something for somebody and having it walk away and you never see it again? First time you sell a piece of art is really exciting, but it's hard because it's gone, right? And typically it's something you work really hard on. And I can remember the first show I did, I said, I can't even dwell on this. Like, I have to accept this as part of it. To me, it was just kind of like, it was like fireworks. When I was little, do you remember when you're little and you get these like little fireworks and be like a little paper tank or something like that, and you think, this is so cool, I just want to have it like a toy? It's like, that's fine, but the moment you light it, that thing's going to burn up, right? Mm-hmm. So you can have one or the other. And ultimately, it
was like cardboard on two little wheels, and you blow it up. Yeah.
Right. That's exactly it. And so you have to say, it's just going to have to be blown up. I have to be prepared for that. But the first couple times you let a piece go and you can get over that, you start to have a different relationship with the physical art you make, and what art means to you as the process of you making it. And that is a huge thing to get over. As I said, I didn't go to art school, but I encountered a lot of people who did go to art school, and they learned an awful lot about art, but only in a little arena. They didn't they never painted in that kind of capacity for a client or for entertainment. They might have been in a studio with other artists working on a model, which is kind of like drawing around other people, but the end result is different. One of my favorite things I ever did at a comic book convention was at Pittsburgh Comic Con. They had this live drawing. I don't know what it was called. It was a raffle. I think it was for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and they would have artists draw things, and they would have, I'm telling you, they had hundreds of people in this giant auditorium buy these tickets, try to win the pieces. And so if you've seen a lot of comic book artists draw, they'll get a little tiny pencil, a little .05 mechanical, and they'll draw this little detailed thing. And they would be in this auditorium, and they'd finish their piece, and they'd hold it up. It would be this big, no one could see anything. And I knew that was a mistake. So I went there, and I brought the biggest paper I had, and I got, really big crayons, and I often drew with it on its side, right? Not on the point. And I made these giant, really elaborate pieces. I would be frothing. I was sweating because I'm making these giant gestural motions, but I made these pieces that were giant. And I remember I'd hold them up and everybody would gasp and they'd love them. And the biggest reason they loved them is they could tell what they were. My
Is
pieces,
that why you give us 11 by 17 paper at the drink and draw? You want to
that's the standard size for comics. That's why. But no, when I did these, I was drawing like 20 by 24.
Wow.
But
yeah.
Here's the thing. Renee George, who put on that convention, used to always say, would invite me to be a guest, and she'd say, "But I need you to do the drinking or whatever it was, the live drawing event." And I said, "Absolutely." The first year I did it, I knew I had to put on a show because it was an audience. Did they want to just watch me do this all day for an hour? That's boring, have my head down. I had to be up. I had to be gestural. So they had me share a table. We were on stage, and there were, I don't know, 16, 20 of us. Had an 8-foot table, everybody gets 4 feet. So I was sharing my table with somebody I didn't know, but what I didn't know is he was a Disney artist, and he had this great clean Disney line. Well, I was working like a madman, and the table's shaking like the dryer on spin cycle. And he was very kind. He did not complain. I didn't even realize I was doing it. But Renee, after the show, said, "I'm really sorry. One of the artists was a little upset." And she explained what had happened, and I got it. I completely got it. I really didn't realize I was being a horrible table mate, and I was. But she said, "Would you be offended if because I know how you work, whomever you sit with, you're going to move that table around. Would you be upset if we gave you your own table and put you off by the side?" And I thought, "You're going to make me the star of the show? Sure." And so that's what happened. I then had a bigger table. I could draw bigger, and I could just make these gigantic paintings. And so at first, it was this thing where I was supposed to, maybe be insulted and put off to the side, and I wasn't on stage with the artist, but I stole the show. But I knew that it played to my strengths. I could draw quickly. I could draw out of my head. I could draw big. I could talk while I draw. I could be entertaining. And so I kind of stole the event. I didn't mean to, but every year mine was the one that everybody wanted. So much so I was really proud of this. There were a couple of people who kept trying to get one and couldn't get one because you had to win them. Yeah. So I made a coupon for their silent auction that night. It wasn't silent auction, it was live auction. And whomever won that coupon was guaranteed one of these pieces. You could come to my table, I would make it, I'd spend the hour drawing it, okay? And what I was so flattered by was my piece sold just before Dinner for Two with Stan Lee, and it sold for more. So somebody wanted that drawing from me more than anybody wanted Dinner with Stan Lee. That was pretty cool. But to my point, you draw for your situation. I wouldn't draw like that normally. I wouldn't do a Vampirilla cover that way. And the piece I make looks different. But what is the goal? That day, the goal was to make a nice piece and to entertain everybody. And to this day, it's still the perfect setting for me. What I mean by that is you could take an entirely different set of circumstances. This is the job I dread the most. Okay, we need you to make one piece. I need to be really, really good. I need you draw in a style that you're not as comfortable with, but you can do, and you have a gigantic deadline. Because I've got all the freedom, I've got every opportunity to make this thing the greatest thing in the world. And I'm far better being loose, spontaneous, I'm not rewarded for being able to talk while I draw in that situation. All they want is the perfect piece. It strips me a lot of my skills. Renee didn't know it, but she just gave me the perfect stage.
Yeah. No, I love talking to you while you work. You were the last time I saw you in person, I think you were drawing something in Bruce Wayne's study, and I watched you draw and shade a lamp for half an hour. I needed to go back to my own table and I couldn't.
Yeah.
You're talking about how you need to make a lamp really dark, and you wouldn't think that because it's the light source in the room.
Right.
But the lamp won't show up if it's not really dark. And I was just sitting there fascinated watching you draw a lamp, and we're talking the whole time, right?
No, so here, this is exactly what happened. My parents are antique lighting dealers, and when you draw an old leaded glass shade lamp, you have to draw the wire work around it, and it has to be dark. And this is what a lamp should look like. Heavy lines like that, but then the light is around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like having it's just like having a light and having a silhouette in front of it. That's all it is. The light bulbs glow, but there is metal work that's covering part of the light bulb, and because that light is so bright, the thing that's blocking it out will look really, really dark. The number one lesson, and I really mean this, number one lesson I'll tell anybody who's drawing is, again, I've never even been to art school, so this might be crazy, but I would say lighting is not absolute. All lighting is relative. If an object looks dark, it's because it's next to something that's light. If an object looks light, it's because it's next to something that's dark. I play this game all the time where I'll sort of show something like this. Like, this is a pen, a big marker that's white, right? Mm-hmm. Well, is it white? I'll put it next to this white text, and I'll bet they don't look the same.
No.
Right. So now one of these two is no longer white. When it's against a black background like it is now, it looks like it's white because there's such a contrast between my backgrounds. So all your lighting is relative. If you want something to look bright, you've got to put a bunch of dark next to it.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
It ends up playing into your colors too. We had somebody make paper dolls out of our costumes. My cosplay duo did recently.
That is cool, really?
Right. And one of my costumes that we had her do was my Emma Frost, and it's white. And so she took really light blue and put really gray blues on it. And it's beautiful. And until she said, I hope the blue white was a good choice for this. Do you think it was accurate to the costume? I went, I didn't notice it was blue.
Right.
My brain told me that was white,
Right.
So
yeah. Every time. It's and it's the funny thing, typically if you have when you're working in 2D art, if you let's say you have a really bright glowing like red light bulb, you make the light bulb white, you make the reflected light around it red, but the thing that's actually glowing is white. And this is a problem that every kid has ever had, because if you've ever been little and you try to draw like a fire and you get out your orange and red and you color in the fire and you say it looks darker than the green grass around it, well, it is. You made it that way. You didn't mean to. The thing that's actually glowing, typically we make it white. And then to make matters worse, one of the reasons why I sort of talk about this relative value side by side is the eye dilates and contracts. And I think this is one of the keys to me and my lighting. I try to mimic what the eye will do. If I have something that's really, really bright, I expect the eye to contract, the iris to contract. And so with that, you lose a lot of the detail in the dark areas because the white is flushing it out.
That makes sense. I'm looking around at some of your stuff on my walls here, and yeah, so like I'm looking at, it's the Trinity from the Justice League, right? I wish I had like a digital image to put up for this. It's on my wall.
It's okay. I think it's on my website, but
yeah, no, I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's
all the lighting is relative.
Yeah. So
then there's also a funny thing that happens, and I've done this. I don't know where this happened, but I kind of developed a style. Really, it was in me when I was young, but the expressiveness kind of took it to a new level because I was really willing to commit to big dark shadows and not having to show all the detail. But you start realizing, and this is kind of an advanced thing, I've seen other artists do this. You'll be drawing something that's really complex like my head, and you'll want like an area over here to be a little bit lighter, and you'll say, it's not quite right, what's wrong? And you think, oh, it needs more dark over here. And it's because there's a relationship between the lights and darks of these two. I'm looking at my mirrored image, and I can't match what I'm doing here. But what it does is you start having this thing where it's like, this part isn't as light as I want it to be, so I have to make this other thing way darker over here. And because the eye is taking all of it in, and it will dilate and contract relative to all the other light and dark areas around it. And that is a complex thing, but I've done it several times where, what's wrong with this? And all this detail here is fighting this thing over here. One of them has to have the detail go away. One of them has to be brighter. One of them has to be darker.
Yeah.
And
I don't complete comments again. Jerry Lane just says, hi, Stuart, and
Gary's a good artist.
Stuart Sayger, thanks for having him on. Hello to both of you, and thank you so much for tuning in. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, you guys, by the way, this is here. You can ask questions too. So we're having just chats about art. Jerry's a good artist. Not only is Jerry a good artist, Jerry's gotten really good, really better. He's been posting a lot on Facebook, and I can see his art really increase in quality over the last 2 years. But that is, as far as drawing goes, one of the things I do want to talk about, because before I really kind of developed my style, I kind of felt like I was stuck. I know a lot of artists hit a plateau and they get stuck, and they kind of feel like, why am I not getting any better? And some of them just never get past it. Some of them get past it when they try something incredibly different. I remember Mike Hoffman is a good artist. I've only met him a couple times. He had always been a fan of Frank Frazetta and worked in this kind of Frazetta style. And then I wish I could remember his story that he told me. This was 10 years ago, but he developed the second style that was really kind of loose and kind of inspired by sort of like 50s hepcat art. And he was very good in one way of working, got inspired by something else, and it changed his other style. Like he hit a new gear, and it happened to him pretty late in his career. But that's what we all strive for, is that aha moment, because I felt there was like about a 1.5 to 2 year period where I wasn't getting any better. And then, as I said, I discovered Esteban. I got better in the next 3 months than I had the previous 2 years.
Yeah, no, I get in a rut sometimes where I feel like the dioramas that I build, they're not getting any better. I feel like I'm kind of recycling the same stuff over and over. And I have a friend who like will not let me stay stuck that way. She sends me pictures of like other 3-dimensional arts, and she's like, look at this. Like, I don't know what to suggest to you. I don't make this stuff, but look at it. She makes me look at things that are different than what I make all the time.
What was the definition of kitsch?
Yeah,
artist A, who's known for making object B, does exactly that. And that's a tricky thing for comic book artists too, particularly conventions, which you were talking about, because if somebody says, I really love the way you draw Kiss, whatever, I've done 27 covers for Kiss, will you please draw Gene Simmons for me, or something like that? I can do that. They don't want me to reinvent Gene Simmons. They've seen what I've done. They want a version of that. And artists, I'm putting words in everyone else's mouth. We're very flattered by that, but there's something trapping at the same time. I always kind of feel like, how does it feel to be, pick somebody, Paul McCartney, I've got a new album. Yeah, but sing Let It Be. Yeah, we know you got new stuff, right? There's a balancing act.
It's the same thing for me too. I get to a point where I'm like, if I have to make another Bulbasaur surrounded by vines, like if I have to make another Pikachu with a bottle of ketchup at a picnic, it's the like classics where I've made it so many times that until I see something that I test some other way, like I'm not going to make that Bulbasaur any better until I go do something.
Well, that's a good point. What do I have to say about the thing? If I've already said it, it's done. I did meet a collector who told me that he collected Batman bog art. And I said, bog, like in a swamp? And he said, no, B-O-G. And I thought, well, yeah, that's what you said. I don't know what that is. And he says, it's Batman on Gargoyle.
Oh!
I've never heard that. And I was like, okay, Batman on Gargoyle. Sure, there's a lot of that, right? So for him, to me, it's kind of like, well, aren't you just collecting, a whole bunch of pieces that are the same? And for him, it's like, no, because they're all by different artists in their style. What does Batman on Gargoyle mean to that artist? And I thought, okay, cool. It's a theme. And as long as he tells the artist, you can do whatever you want beyond that, yeah, there's some room to play.
No, I'm sure there is. I mean, first of all, what does the gargoyle look like?
What does Batman look like? I mean, I don't, I mean, that's one of the cool things about working on these characters. They have enough versions these days. You can get a Batman that looks like Neil Adams or Alan Davis or Bob Kane, Bruce Timm, whatever. Now, if you're not a comic book person, they'll start to all look a lot alike, right? There are art forms that I'm not very well versed in and I think we all suffer from that, where we can kind of say these all just kind of seem like the same thing to me. People who don't play video games, right, will look at something and say, I don't think there's any difference between all those army games and Doom. You're running around first person point of view shooting something, right? Exactly. And if you don't play that video game, they're the same.
Shooters all look the same to me. That was the exact example I was going to use. I don't play them. So and I know they don't look the same to people who play a lot of first person shooters. I know they don't feel the same. I know it's not the same game to them, but to me, I'm just like, I'm holding a gun. I'm going after that guy. I don't.
That is one of the really cool and really, I think, genuinely, I mean, the sad things about this hobby, in that nothing is better as a participant in the hobby when you have something you really love and you can share it with someone who really gets it. I've known people who've been collecting, comics their entire life. A friend of mine, I think when he was about 13 years old, told me he wanted to get every X-Men. He was going to get all the original X-Men. And about the time he was 30, he finally got to number 1. And I remember, so it took him 17 years. And I remember him being able to tell his friends who he had been friends with for those 17 years, I got it. And they knew, because they were collectors, what a joy that was for him to finally get that thing that he'd been after. But there were other people that would look at it and just say, so tell me what this means to you. It's like, I can't tell. Do you collect anything? No, I can't tell you what this is like. That's the sad part about it. There's a community here, and your community gets you, and you want to be welcoming to other people, but there does take a little bit of people learning the lexicon and finding out what this stuff is about. A friend of mine was a collector of Jim Aparo art. I love Jim Aparo, and that's how we got to know each other. He had 60 pages of original Jim Aparo art. And I was just poring over them. I said, those are fantastic. I love them. And then I was at his house about 2 years later, and I said, you got to show me all those Aparo pages. And he said, oh, I got rid of them all. And I said, what are you talking about? It's your favorite thing. Why'd you get rid of them? And he said, well, I'll tell you why. Because he drew my very favorite cover of comics ever of all time. And I said, yeah. And he said, I got it. I got the original drawing. And I said, okay. And he said, that was the holy grail for me. I don't need the others anymore. The others were steps to get there. And I thought, okay, I wasn't able to exactly get there, but I was close. But that was the thing, is like, he wanted to show me that art because he knew I appreciated it. And then when he got the cover that was his favorite cover, like, I started thinking about that. Like, we all have covers we'd love to have. If you could have that one image, what would you trade for it? I mean, it would be a lot, right?
Yeah, I guess it would be.
Yeah. So that's part of the hobby, and it's fun to share it, and it's sad when you just can't share it.
Yeah. We've got more people tuning in new now. We've got
I know Matt.
Good morning from Melbourne, Australia. And
I will tell Matt in a couple of weeks I'm going to tell everybody, but in a couple of weeks I'm going to do a live show on Facebook and Instagram when Alice Cooper #5 comes out. I'm going to have a sale of all my Alice Cooper covers, and I'm probably going to offer some Kiss stuff in there as well, because there's a lot of cross-pollination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I think
just a couple of weeks.
Requesting for you to draw something. This comment says, circle frame featuring a flock of pterodons flying in front of a full moon.
Well,
what do they want? What is that?
I know exactly what this person wants. So, so I hope this doesn't turn into sort of a firefight here. But Christopher is a really good artist, and this is exactly what he is very good at drawing. He's drawn dinosaurs his entire life, and he if anybody can draw this, he can draw it, and he will have it look perfectly. So the reason why he wants me to draw it is so that after I do it and it's not quite right, he can show me up. But he's one of my very good friends. But also, getting back to our subject, I'm going to stay on Christopher here for a second, because one of the things that's really cool about this guy is he can work in 2D and 3D, which is what we were talking about earlier. I've seen him do both. He can build monsters, he can draw monsters. I know that his ability to draw helps his sculpting, and I think it works the other way around. I would like to think that the same is true for me, except I can't sculpt. I just can't. I've already drawn that for him. He's just
okay. So
he's causing trouble.
I got it.
Yeah. But under other circumstances, I often do draw live, and I'm sure on my Facebook show, when I do the Alice Cooper show, I'll probably draw live then. Alice is hard to draw, but not as hard as some people. He's got some pretty good distinctive facial features, and that always helps. Sometimes the hardest people to draw, I think, are really, really like perfectly symmetrical, beautiful people. There's just, it's almost like a blank slate. It's like, well, okay, you know, a perfect person, just a perfectly beautiful, symmetrical person with straight hair. It's hard.
I did a charcoal portrait of Dakota Fanning when she was 12. She has a really symmetrical face.
Yeah.
I'm about the same age as her. And so I was in middle school and I was trying to get into sketching and portraiture more before I realized my passions in art are elsewhere. But I know exactly what you mean. She's looking straight on at the camera, and it was.
I mean, it's tough too. And this discussion really plays into how comic books work a lot, because I think it's one of the reasons why, you know, characters have logos on their chests. You know, as long as you can look at an S on Superman, you know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Batman, I've told people several times, I draw Superman and Batman have the exact same head. Batman just has these. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a whole bunch of comic artists are guilty of. Superhero comic book artists particularly. You know, John Byrne's got one or two faces for men. Neil Adams is kind of that way. Does Hal Jordan really have that much of a different face than Bruce Wayne if you're Neil Adams? I'm sure he would say yes, they do. I'm not sure I agree with it, but
yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it,
I think Jim Lee has one face. He's one of the all-time greatest comic book artists, period, for superheroes. But
yeah, I mean, I have loved the X-Men since like the cartoons, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like Jean Grey, and I do like Phoenix, and I swear it goes back to when I was a kid. Jean Grey didn't have a symbol, so I didn't recognize her as like a superhero until she had a big symbol on her chest. But I was like, oh, the Phoenix, I know who that is when I was a kid now.
So I love you say that, because that was one of the reasons I wasn't a Marvel fan growing up, because I read comics when I was really little, and my entry into this was sort of the DC Inverse Justice League, and all the regular Justice League, they all had logos on their chest. Wonder Woman at least had an eagle when I was little, but you know, she was the outlier. You know, Flash has a distinct logo, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Hawkman even has the hawk, the Atom has a little thing on his chest, and I just kind of felt like if you're a superhero, you need to have that. You need to have gloves that come to here, and the Marvel characters didn't have that. And also, a lot of the Marvel characters didn't have masks, which I thought was really weird. Like, I just thought this, you know, because DC Comics, at least the old ones, made such a big deal of secret identities, and Marvel didn't have them. So I just kind of looked at all of them, and I kind of felt like, you guys are breaking all the rules. You're kind of not doing it right. I really felt that way.
Yeah, we are a little over an hour. I'm going to play you guys a video again to let you all know why we're here. I mean, I'll talk to Stuart any day for any reason, but to go live on the internet and have a bunch of strangers be a part of our conversation, that I am doing for charity. So let's talk about, and by talk about, I mean, let somebody else talk about comic books for kids for a minute.
The Multiverse Fundraiser is partnering with Comic Books for Kids to raise money for their cause. Their mission is to provide comic books to children in hospitals and cancer centers across the United States, Canada, and the UK. We believe in the importance of providing stories that promote hope and bravery to kids who are facing things that are scarier than any supervillain. And we truly believe in this cause. To donate, you can either go to our Facebook page at www.facebook.com /the Multiverse Fundraiser or directly to comicbooksforkids.org.
So if you're just tuning in, that's why we're here. We started out talking a lot more relevant to that. We talked about what it means to us to get comic books when you're going through a rough point in your life. So if you're joining us now, feel free to just start the whole video over when we finally wrap up.
Well, I have something I want to tell you about.
Oh, yeah.
As far as like comics for kids and what it means and all that. I've said this several times, and then I always think, boy, this sounds so pompous coming out of my mouth. And then I always feel like people usually agree with me. It's like, I will tell you what, I have what I think is the coolest comics collectible anybody can have. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I have the very unit. I have the spinner rack that I bought all my childhood comics off of.
That is the coolest. Like, that's the coolest. Okay.
So there was a drugstore near where I grew up. And they had this spinner rack there for forever. And when I was about 30, 31 years old, the family business was finally closing. And they were getting rid of all their fixtures and things. And I went in and I said, listen, I know you said you're selling your fixtures. I really want to buy that comic book rack. And the gentleman who owned the drugstore said, listen, that might be a little bit different thing. We got to figure out what we're going to do with that. And then he kind of paused for a second. He said, wait a minute. You're that guy who draws comics, aren't you? And I said, yeah, that was my childhood rack. I bought everything off of that when I was little. And he said, okay, yeah, you probably do want that. Let me see what I can do. As long as my family doesn't want it, you can have it. And I waited on pins and needles for about 60, 90 days or whatever. And he finally called me up. He said, it's yours. And I mean, there was like a cloud, the shape of my body there. And the funny thing was, I just emotionally wanted that one. It was just, I remembered it. It was the one. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I remember buying packs of Star Wars cards made a brand new and a comic book off of it. And the crazy thing is they had it in this drugstore. I'm not joking. It was next to a public water fountain. And so you had to be very careful because when there could occasionally be water that splashed off the fountain onto your comics, you had to look very closely. I'm not making this up, but what these things do to you when you're young, how they get a hold of you, how you interact with them, you know, most of the people I know who are comic book lovers and adult, they have some sort of story or backstory as a kid. You do too. You came to them a little later, but I know who your friends are. You were around these characters your entire life.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I was. And then I reached a point where, so my friends, Mark and Ruby, you know, Mark and Ruby.
Yeah.
You're a workaholic, Krayley, and they would have me talk to you and they complained to you about how I was a workaholic. They thought I needed an escape. They wanted me to get more into comics and more into cosplay, the whole convention scene. They wanted me to talk to you. They were so excited when you started encouraging me to do art as my job. Because when you're a workaholic, you need to do something that fulfills you, that you like. If you don't want to turn your passion into your job, don't do it. If you always turn your job into your passion, no matter what you actually like, do what you like. It's really important for you to do a job you like.
Here's the thing, though. I have a bad habit of this. I encourage everybody to do this sort of thing. I mean, everybody, because my thing is, I always liked drawing. I majored in journalism, but I drew for my college newspaper. I drew for my friends. I drew for everything. If the career had never happened, I was still going to draw. You know, I've had a few friends that they didn't get as good as they wanted, or things didn't happen the way they wanted, and they broke their heart and they quit. And I kind of felt like the joy was always having it there for when I wanted it, for whatever I wanted it to be. I mean, there were times where I wasn't drawing as much, and I was maybe in high school, and it would be fun to look. I drew a cartoon one time of my first girlfriend and I on a date, right? And it was like, you want to write a letter or make something for somebody, then you can do it. And whether it's drawing or, you know, making a special meal for somebody, or, you know, sewing something for somebody, having these outlets, these creative outlets to do something. And so if you like to draw, I would say keep it in your life, your entire life. And however big you want it to be or small you want it to be, just go for that. If you want to make a comic book, but you think you're not ready, or you aren't good enough, or you aren't professional or whatever, it's not about that. It's about, what do you want to do and how is it going to be satisfying? Mm-hmm. For me personally, the truly the greatest joy in my life was making my first comic book. I'm not supposed to say that. I know I'm not, but I grew up working in a comic book store. I got the job when I was 13. I had collected this stuff from when I was little, and I didn't publish my first one until I was either 29 or 30. And it was such a big, hard, difficult thing to do. I mean, the mountain was so steep, and there wasn't really digital printing. No one was doing that yet. So I had to find an offset printer. It was so hard. And so when I say it was my greatest joy, it was easily the greatest challenge I ever gave myself. And just getting that first one done and saying, if I never make another one, I've done it, was a great feeling. When you love something and you want to be a part of it, and then you say, well, I made this. That's my little drop in the bucket. That was great. That was it. And, the second one was easier. And then the third one was easier. And then foolishly, somebody started hiring me and paying me money for this. And then I had no real reason to quit or get another job. But I've known so many people who, two things, finally made a comic book, and they were so excited about it. And they said it was a thrill that they never had. Nothing came close to it. And then there were other people who had it, and because it wasn't a giant success, they were brokenhearted. The latter is the thing that I'm always fearful of, because I don't think anybody should ever be brokenhearted when they make a comic book. When Ailey hosted Comic Book in a Day, a week ago or whatever, she told everybody, okay, you guys have all made a comic book now. There are lots of people like comic books. There are lots of people who want to make comic books. Probably 98% of them never make a comic book. So I always tell everybody, even if it doesn't do what you wanted it to, remember, you got further than 98% of the people. And I really believe that. So like in your case, the fact that you set up for a table and I encouraged you, one of the reasons I encouraged you is because to me, you were already there. The hardest part is getting someone to try. You tried. And then you tried again and did another one. And I just kind of feel like, well, you're ready to throw yourself into it. So why not? If you want to figure out what this thing can be, then you have to jump in the pool. Right? The thing that's not helping you is when you want to do it and people are saying, probably shouldn't, just keep it as a hobby. You'll be regretful. I think it's better, you're happier if you can say, I might lose a little, I might lose a bit of time, might lose a little bit of money, but I'm willing to gamble that, to put it in, to invest that into myself and see what I am. And in your case, you made money. It unlocked things for you.
That's my full-time job.
I know.
I've got other part-time jobs too. It's not, I'm not rich because I sell Pokemon fan art at conventions, right?
Well,
but I mean,
you like it, you enjoy it, it's fulfilling. I mean, I tell young fans, artists, creators all the time, it's like, you get older, it is harder to find a new movie you want to watch. It is harder to find a new band you want to listen to. It is hard to find this thing you want to do. But if you have a creative thing in you and you want to make stuff that can grow and change for your tastes for your entire life, it will be there for you as long as you nurture it for forever. That is really hard to find, something that's that satisfying and fulfilling in this world. That's why we collect and why we have hobbies. I mean, they do different things for us emotionally, but I feel like really good hobbies are ones that stick with us for a long time, whether it's, collecting comic books or being a Green Bay Packers fan or whatever. This thing you get to be invested in and have the journey be the joy.
Yeah. Jerry, is it Lang or Lange? Do you know, Stuart?
It's Lang.
Lang. Okay. So Jerry Lang, who I just followed you, by the way, Stuart said your art was good. So I went and looked at some of it. But
Jerry's good.
Stuart has a great understanding of setting lighting and dramatic use of colors in his work. I didn't put this up when we were talking about it, but I wanted to make sure that we're not ignoring our audience and talking about everybody having the same head or the same face a lot of times and using symbols. Matt Arcaro says, agree with Stuart. That's how the whole Kiss gimmick worked with the makeup era. And I've never thought about that before, but yeah, no, their different makeup is totally their superhero.
It's huge. And
people who are fans, but
and they tried different makeups. I mean, they tried different designs too. And so there are different versions of it, and they sort of settled on what was best. I don't know as much about Kiss as I probably should. I got to draw their covers. I grew up with it to some extent, but I mean, I have to be honest. My first album was Def Leppard Pyromania, and so Kiss was just a little breath before me. But the older kids definitely had all the cards, and I was familiar with them. And I mean, they look great. I mean, they're fantastic to draw, and there's so many great things you can do with lighting for them. I mean, Ace Frehley alone, all the glitter that came off his guitar and everything in the fire. It's like, who wouldn't want to draw that stuff? There's a reason they make good comic books. They look like superheroes.
Yeah.
But Jerry, I'm gonna get back to Jerry. Just use him as an example. You know, Jerry's a guy that I know Jerry also plays the guitar. I have a guitar. I play it every once in a while, but I'm awful at it. But it does give me an outlet. And there are a lot of people who really, I mean, this is the drag of it. For a lot of people, if they draw or they make music, there's not a great way for those things to stack and multiply each other. You know, they seem like different endeavors. But there are people who are good musicians and they'll say, I'm going to draw my own album cover, or vice versa. Or maybe they write a comic book. And I know there had to have been some people who say, oh, I wrote a comic book, but I also made a score for it. Here's the CD. You can play it to accompany it. I can't do that, but how cool does that sound? Jerry might be able to do that. I'm always impressed by people who say, I want to make something. I want to do something. It's going to be expressive. It's going to be hard. And I'm just going to take on the challenge. And so he's done it all.
I love that too. That's one of the things I like about hanging out in Artist Alley at the convention, though, is that you see all kinds of people who are putting themselves out there with something they did that, like, especially I've been doing it for a while now, like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And you see new people come in and then you see them come back. And now I'm getting to the point that other artists have been with me where they're like, I'm happy you're still here. Like, yeah. It's hard and you keep doing it. Now I'm feeling that way about the baby artists. Some of them are older than me, right? But like the people who are new to doing it as their job. And I'm like, I'm so glad you're still here. It's hard, you know?
So that is one of the things that was such a weird thing that I experienced, and I figured out what it was. So I did my very first show, Wizard World Chicago 2001, and then came back for 2002 when I had the second issue of Shiver in the Dark. And I remember there were people who came up to me and they had this very odd interaction with so many people the first day of the second show. And a lot of them came up to me and they kind of did this way about them. They would say things to me like, you're back. Yes. Oh, well, it's good to see you again. Okay, it's good to see you too. And they're like, you made that comic book last year, didn't you? Yeah, here's issue 2. And like, you made another. Okay. And what I found out is what happens to easily 90% of the people is they do a book, they don't turn into Rob Liefeld or Jim Lee overnight, they're brokenhearted and they quit. And I found that out because one of the guys came up to me, and it might have been James O'Barr, but it was somebody like that who'd been around a little bit. I'd made an impression with, and he said, it wasn't, oh, you're back. It was, you're back. Okay. And that meant, all right, so you're going to take it on. You're diving in. Now we're going to pay attention to you because you really were supposed to quit. And I know you've experienced that. And I've known there are lots of reasons to quit. Look, it's really hard to put everything you have into something, spend months and months and months making something, throw all this money at it, then set up at a table, which costs you money, travel, hotel, or whatever, work all 3 days long and say, wow, I managed to lose $2,000. And for a lot of people, that's all that happens. And there are people who really aren't in a situation to where they can say, I'm going to play the long game. But I was interested in this. I had pretty realistic expectations. I grew up working in a comic book store. I was fortunate. People liked my book out of the gate. I wasn't a superstar, but the second or third day of my first show, my booth happened to be next to Diamond Distributors back when they were the only people in town. And they said, hey, we've never seen this book, but it looks like it's selling pretty well. Did you send it to us? And I said, no. And they said, well, people are buying it. We'd love to carry it. I've never even heard of that happening. They said, submit it. It will have to be reviewed like everything else, but you'll get in. Well, I wasn't prepared for that. So I had to almost immediately have a second printing. That's the way it worked out. But you got to put yourself in that position. And, there's a photo of me rolling up my sleeves at the first show just before it opened, like 15 minutes. They said the show floor will be open. And I had this moment where I kind of felt like, okay, this is it. The show is about to begin. I'm gonna, whether I'm up here or down there, it's gonna happen. Like nothing can go wrong at this point. The book is formally in my hand. The show's gonna open. I will have I know that I'm gonna cross the finish line. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so the show opens, and everybody has to get in line, or else they're not going to be able to get their signature from Frank Miller. So people run into the room, and they all ran by me, right? Because they all had their guy they had to go see, and that kind of hurt, right? Because then no one's even looking at you. But you get through that first hour, you make your first couple sales, people like it, and then people come back and start asking, where's the second issue? And it was an amazing feeling to have people say, will you sign it? All that sort of thing. There's a validation that comes with it. And there were also people who hated it. And that was really good too. Not everybody's going to like your book. You become aware of that. You become aware of how to let your art go when you sell it to somebody. You have people who give you criticisms that isn't even fair, or maybe even something you agree with is accurate. And that's kind of hard to take, and you have to go through that. And then you have other people who criticize you, and they are right, and it is fair, and you should be better or have done something wrong, and you got to take that criticism as well, right? You've let yourself out there to everybody having an opinion, and you kind of get through it. There's so much growing up that can happen as a creative person being at that table. So I tell a lot of people, if you're interested in making this stuff, got to set up at a table. You got to go through the slings and arrows. You're going to learn so much more about your work, what people think of it, how you respond emotionally to being loved, being hated, people being indifferent. I mean, truly, your first show, how much did you get out of it? A ton.
Well, my first show, I got a lot out of it, and I was pausing because I'm not sure what to consider my first show. Because my first show, I was so not confident that I just shared a friend's table. I put some stuff and was like, I'll just see if people even care.
Right.
So, yeah, and then people did care. I learned a lot.
And some of them hated it too, didn't they?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of people. The thing for me is people go, ugh, that's how much you're charging for that. And I'm like, well, then you don't, if I'm charging $60 for a Pokeball, you don't like it $60 much. Like now I'm like, go away. But at the time that really hurt. I was like, these take so long. Like,
well, I always tell everybody, if you're going to make something creatively, it's far more important to count the number of people. It doesn't matter how many people like you. It matters how many people love you. I like lots of comics. I really can only afford the ones I love. And so if I like it or I hate it, it's kind of the same thing, because I don't have time to buy either one. I don't have time to ingest either one. I'm fortunate enough that I have enough fans who really like my work and really, really love it enough to buy it.
I love work. I come by and I'm just like, what am I getting? So
well, I'm not complaining. I love that too. So you're going to get some Vampirillas. So here, we've been on a long time. Let's start putting a lid on this. I know that I have so many things coming out. Here's the last plug if you're still watching. I've got these 5 Vampirillas coming up, 2 Archie books. I got asked to do another cover for Conan. I've got to start that in a couple days. My convention schedule is coming together. I'm going to be in Atlanta, but my first sort of show in the Midwest is also going to be Hall of Heroes in Elkhart, Indiana. I'm going to have a ton of new stuff for that. If you come see me there, I will have a lot of new art and new material. And then C2E2 is one of the big shows I have coming up, and I can't tell you what it is, but I have a really, really cool, I don't even know what I want to call it, thing for C2E2. We'll call it that. I can't tell you what it is yet, but please, yes, go to stuartsayger.com and it'll tell you all the shows I'm going to. But I've got a big thing coming for C2E2. And then I'm going to have a couple live shows here on Facebook and Instagram soon. I'm going to be selling Alice Cooper's once the last issue comes out, and something else. Oh, I finally got some new graded books back. So here's a Red Sonja #1. So if you want any of my graded Red Sonjas, I'll have those. Just lots of new stuff.
I can't get a print of your Red Sonja on a horse. I'm going to have to buy the whole comic just for the cover art.
You poor thing. I'll sell it to you. Sonja does look good. Where is that one? I had one of those here. I got one. It was so hard to get good grades of those. this guy here. Let's see if we can get one that's not all glare.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure that's the one with the glare. That's the one. That's
Yeah.
the one. I was super mad that you don't have it as a print.
Well, you know, I didn't say you couldn't have it. I just said how you had to have it. But
Yeah.
there's a lot coming out. Oh, I don't even know if you knew about this because we haven't chatted for a while. 2 new art books.
I did not know.
I'm loaded, and they're square bound. They're really nice and heavy. So when I tell you I've got a lot of new stuff, I really mean it. So
yeah.
Do we have any last questions we can ask?
We've got a couple of comments. Someone, Kat Taka, is really excited about your Conan cover.
It's my second one. Yeah, the first one, it looks really, really good. I can't tell you. Well, so they've actually asked me to do 2 more. So I'm in line to at least do 3 at this point. But the second one is due right away. The third one, I probably shouldn't even talk about it. But I think it's Conan will be on it, but it'll have some other characters that are lesser known. They're known, they're just lesser known. You'll love them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Brandon Knoll says, one of my favorite prints I have is one of Stuart's, a Dr. Fate print that is just phenomenal. I might have that one too. I know I have a Stuart Dr. Fate, so.
He's so much fun to draw. It's there are certain characters that I and I think a lot of artists who work on them have sort of an emotional resonance for. So there is a Brave and the Bold comic. It comes out around issue 158 or so. It's drawn by Don Newton. I got it when I was very little, and it's Batman and Dr. Fate. And when I draw Dr. Fate and I think of Dr. Fate, that is where my brain goes every time. A lot of guys, if they work on these characters, if they have a connection to it, they can tell you the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'm one of them.
One of my favorite prints I've got is a Phoenix that you did. I'm pretty sure it's Dark Phoenix, but the way the light is, her suit and hair are basically black.
She's like this. Yeah.
Exactly. She's like that. And I love so much that I can't even tell which version it is. I just know that's Phoenix.
Oh, it's Dark Phoenix.
It's real dark.
Look at her eyes. They're blank because she's possessed.
They are. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it didn't matter which version it was. What mattered was the mood, because I love that character no matter what. I love every version of Phoenix. I don't think you can retell Dark Phoenix and make it any better, but I like that the character is tragic. I think that's really cool. We have evil, we have bad things happen, but it doesn't often add up to tragedy. Yeah. We've got another question.
Yes.
Kat Taka says, see a
Bellet. Next question.
Next
question. Right. I know what that means. We'll go on. We'll leave it right there.
Okay. And then I missed this one from Jerry Lang earlier when we were talking about artists when you come back or versus putting your art out there. So Jerry says, it's important to put your art out there just to get experience sharing. Put your yes on the table, as they say.
I've never heard that phrase, but that's it. I mean, it is so hard. I can remember getting this sort of thrill in my early 20s of sort of trying the things that seemed like you kind of couldn't do because you just kind of couldn't get the nerve up to it. I remember I was at one summer here, I'll tell you this, one summer I was working at the Comic Carnival, and this girl came in, of all things, to buy an issue of Wildcats for her boss before we sold out. Okay, I'd never seen her before, had virtually no interaction with her whatsoever, but she came in and like had a piece of paper and wanted to buy that comic book. And so she did, and she definitely caught my eye, and I saw where it was she worked, and I just said, I'm going to go over there and ask that girl out. I knew nothing about her, but there was this like thrill of somebody say, well, you kind of can't really do that. You know what I mean? It's kind of insane to just walk over and just feel like you could ask somebody out. But I thought the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no, right? And they didn't. They said yes. So I went on a date. We weren't right for each other, and that was fine. But there was that sensation of just saying, to Jerry's point, put it on the table. All I did was walk over there and I said, you came into the comic shop? And she said yes, and I introduced myself, and that was it. But it seemed big at the time. It seemed hard that you would say, yeah, I'm just going to stick myself out there and make myself really vulnerable for rejection, potentially. You just do it.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for a while now. Originally, we were planning to go for an hour, and then people had comments, and we got to talking. So this is a reminder. This is part of the Multiverse Fundraiser. So the Multiverse Fun without the D, razor.com. There's a big donate button right in the middle of there, and so you know what? You should go there and you should hit that button so that we can get comic books in the hands of kids in hospitals and cancer wards all around the United States and internationally now. They have a partnering program that gets comic books to soldiers and active duty service members. It's really important to me. I don't want to beat a dead horse for people who've been with us since the beginning or for a while even. But I mean, if you're here, granted, based on the sort of stuff we talked about, I'm guessing it's important to you too. So I'm gonna play us off with a video, and then we'll say goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Good night, you guys.
Thank you. Oh, I do know at least one person donated because of this. I got a message a couple minutes ago.
Ooh, do we know the name? No,
Yep.
maybe we shouldn't out that.
It's our policy at the Multiverse Fundraiser to not people's name on a donation, but I know who it is, and
okay,
they donated. So
well, we love that, and thanks for having me. And I hope you guys donate more. I like what you guys are doing. It's a good cause, and comic books have given me so very much. I'm very happy to be a part of this.
Yeah, no, I'm happy too. We've gotten some amazing feedback. So thank you so much for your time, Stuart.
We'll talk to you soon. I'll see you on the road.
Yeah, I'll see you at Hall of Heroes.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah,
it's it's a really, really cool, fun show. I like it. And I think it's going to be bigger this year because their new convention center is supposed to be open. And I think they just added Dean Cain.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, Dean Cain, the Superman actor.
Yep.
So see you soon.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
My name is Mark Weiss, and I'm the president and founder of an organization called Comic Books for Kids. Our complete and entire mission is dedicated to providing comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers. I've been passionate about comic books literally my entire life. I love the industry, I love the mythology of the characters, but I've always also wanted to give back. And it occurred to me that perhaps something could be done that would allow us to create an organization that allowed us to provide comic books to the kids in hospitals and cancer centers. And I asked them, I said, if we were to provide comic books to you, would you like them? Every hospital I called had the same story. Please do this for our kids. My goal at the time, a year ago, was to deliver 1,000 comics in a calendar year. By the way, I had no inventory. To 20 hospitals, which, by the way, I hadn't contacted, and bring on 2 publishers. That was my 2017 goal. As we wrapped up 2017, we shipped out over 8,000 comics last year to over 100 children's hospitals in almost every state in the country, and almost every publisher that is here today is working with us. Our community tab on our website shows stories from nurses, from children, from mothers of students, patients, children who have had their lives touched by the simple, small act of kindness of just giving them a comic book. The stories are incredible. You can't make this up. And if anyone had ever told me that we would be influencing people's lives by just these small acts of kindness, I don't think I would have ever recognized the impact. I feel very humbled and very flattered that we've been able to touch so many people's and children's lives. And I never thought the responsiveness would be what we are seeing. It's about letting kids be kids again. And it's about bringing comic books back to the kids.